Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, Hot Talk KON. We have on the air with us Ryan Anderson, Dr. Anderson. He's a William E. Simon Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. We only have him for 10 minutes, so we're going to be quick and we're going to go directly into the topic. Dr. Anderson, thank you for being on the Joe Miller Show.
Sure thing. Happy to be with you.
I want to talk a little bit about the Indiana law that was recently passed, as well as some others. It's protecting religious liberty. Can you tell us what's motivated the law, what the law is about, and kind of the left's reaction to it?
Sure. So this law is in reaction to a bad Supreme Court decision about 25 years ago, known as the Smith decision. And it watered down the Supreme Court's protections for religious liberty. So Congress, back in 1993, passed what was known as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. They were restoring religious freedom. Congress passed a law that said that if the government is going to substantially burden the free exercise of religion, it can only do so for a compelling state interest being pursued in the least restrictive way possible. That law, the Supreme Court said, only applied to the federal government. It wouldn't apply to state government actions. So in the intervening 20 years, we've seen 20 states have passed state versions of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and another 10 states, their courts have applied the same standard. So in total, there are 30 states plus the federal government that say that religious liberty protections are really important. The government can only violate religious liberty for a compelling state interest in the least restrictive way possible. What's notable about this is that when this was passed back in 1993, the bill passed unanimously in the House of Representatives, and Representative Chuck Schumer was its sponsor. It passed with 97 votes in the Senate, and Senator Ted Kennedy was its sponsor, and it was signed into law by President Bill Clinton. Religious liberty 20 years ago was a bipartisan issue. Everyone agreed about it. What we've seen in the past couple of years is it became a partisan issue because the Democrats walked away from it. The political left decided that religious liberty wasn't worth protecting if it was going to be protecting conservatives. So we saw last year in the Hobby Lobby decision that all of a sudden what had been a consensus issue, all Americans deserve religious liberty protections, became a partisan issue because there were people who didn't want the Green family and the Hahn family, the owners of Hobby Lobby and the owners of Conestoga Wood, to be protected from government coercion. The federal government, in this case, was coercing an evangelical arts and crafts store and a Mennonite woodworking company into paying for abortion-causing drugs. Thankfully, the Supreme Court protected their religious liberty using the federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Last week, Indiana voted to do the same exact thing, and Governor Pence signed it into law. And for the past week, we have seen hysterics, lies in the media, accusations of bigotry and hatred. I'll let you get back in, yeah.
Yeah, let me just get this straight. So you're saying what Indiana passed is just like the standard that has already been applied by the federal government and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, as well as the 30 states that have passed or have had courts impose similar standards. Same thing.
Exactly the same thing.
Wow. And yet
it's
the vitriol
same exact language.
The vitriol is unbelievable. Tell us a little bit about what the left is doing.
Sure. So the left has been saying that this is a bill to license discrimination, and in particular, it's to license discrimination against gays and lesbians. They said that this will be a bill that will allow restaurant owners to kick gay people out of their restaurants. I was on MSNBC on Tuesday night on the Ed Show, and Ed Schultz, he said, this bill, it's the right-wing agenda. You want to be able to kick gays out of restaurants. And I said to him, tell me one person who has said that. I don't know a single religion that teaches that you can't serve a hamburger to someone because they're gay, or that you can't make them happy birthday flowers. And I don't know of a single instance in which someone has done that. No one is suggesting that these laws would do that. All these laws might do would be protect a photographer or a florist or a baker who objects to a same-sex wedding. They might protect pro-lifers from having to pay for abortion. They might protect adoption agencies. He and I went back and forth for a while, and then he told his producers to cut my microphone off.
Oh, my word.
You can actually see the clip where he says, cut his mic, and he's on the air.
Wow.
This is the way that this debate has gone down.
So, there was an article that was written. I'm going to talk about this after. I know you've got another interview that you've got to attend to, but it's called Gay Totalitarianism and the Coming Persecution of Christians by John Zimmerak, an individual that you know. Interesting theory posited that, look, what we're seeing is a major transition in society in a very, very rapid way. Do you think that this is something that is broadly held across society, that attitudes are changing, or do you think this is just simply an agenda item that's been effectively trumpeted by the left?
I think most Americans are outraged when they hear the story of the 70-year-old grandmother in Washington State who was sued by the state attorney general because even though she had employed gay people and even though she had been selling flowers to a particular gay couple for a decade, when she was asked to do a same-sex wedding, she declined. And he then sued her, and she lost that court case. Ordinary Americans find that horrifying. In a free society, why is the government penalizing a 70-year-old grandmother because she simply wants to run her flower shop in accordance with her beliefs? It's only the activists that like this.
Any other outrageous cases? I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes left before you got to go.
Sure. Oh, there have been cases of photographers, of florists, of bakers. Right now, the Little Sisters of the Poor, an order of Catholic nuns, are still in the federal court suing the Obama administration because they wanted to be left free to run their charity, the ministry taking care of the elderly, the sick, and the dying, without having to pay for abortion. And the Obama administration said no.
Wow.
We've seen Catholic charity adoption agencies have been shut down in Massachusetts, in Illinois, in San Francisco, and in Washington, D.C. These religious liberty laws are absolutely necessary because they prevent the government from coercing religious believers.
So what do we need to do in order to encourage, I guess, the remaining 19 states that need to adopt these kind of standards?
Well, it's not just that. I mean, just moments ago, Governor Pence signed into law a bad revision of his state's religious liberty law. So some people have actually caved to the lies that have been told about this bill, and in a very significant way, the fix that he just signed into law eliminates important religious liberty protections in
Tell us
Indiana.
about the fix. What did
Sure.
he do?
What it did was this fix said that sexual orientation rights will always trump the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana.
Oh, my word.
The whole point of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act is to create a balancing test between competing interests so that religious liberty and sexual liberty can coexist. He just said that that sexual liberty will trump religious liberty under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
What, was this by some sort of executive order, or was there legislation that amended?
Legislation this morning. They crafted this legislation last night. This morning they had a press conference at 9 a.m. They voted it through today, and then he just signed it moments ago. And the legislation has much greater problems than that because it was so poorly done at the last minute that it now raises concerns about whether or not pacifists will have to celebrate war memorials and honor veterans and things like that, because it said that you can't discriminate on the basis of veteran status or military service. You can't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or race or sex. So it raises a question about whether or not you're going to have to pay for abortions, because people have said that discrimination based on sex entails not covering abortion procedures. It's a terrible piece of public policy that was rushed through at the last minute to revise a good piece of public policy that we have lived with for over 20 years.
Wow. Well, Ryan Anderson, appreciate you coming on the show. William E. Simon Fellow, Heritage Foundation. I'd love to have you back to give us updates from time to time. We'll certainly get the news out about what happened in Indiana and what people need to do across the country to be awakened to what's going on. Again, thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Sure thing.
So Dr. Anderson has another interview that he's got to get to. We appreciate him, of course, being on the air with us. One of the articles that we're going to talk about when we come back after the bottom of the hour, the messages, is the article, Gay Totalitarianism and the Coming Persecution of Christians, written by John Zimmerak. Very good read. We have it up at joemiller.us. We'll also talk about some of the other issues, including Governor Mike Pence's decision. First knowledge I had was just, you heard it when I heard it, about the revision that was passed out that basically takes away the very reasons that people were clamoring for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. You know, if you're a baker, you're a flower arranger, you're involved in providing marriages, obviously, if you've got deeply held religious beliefs that say you shouldn't be involved in that, you should be able to conduct your business under that belief system rather than being fearful of being compelled to do something else. And, of course, a number of these businesses, and this Dr. Anderson mentioned this, a number of these businesses that have faced these decisions in the past have faced not just horrific legal fees, but some of them have been sued successfully. Like the 70-year-old grandmother in Washington State. I mean, she lost her case. It wasn't just a matter of legal fees, but judgment, damages, etc. Terrible thing. Anyway, what's the country coming to? Hopefully not the direction it's getting pulled to we must resist. We must do everything we can to ensure that fundamental freedoms are preserved. We'll talk more about this after these messages. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show.